from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. It's Mind the Gap, a practical web series for young and future music educators. Tonight on the program, from Arlington Heights, Illinois, Director of Bands at John Hersey High School, Scott Casagrande, Band Director at Thomas Middle School, Candi Horton. Tonight's conversation moderated by David Starnes. Please welcome David Starnes.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Music for All's Mind the Gap. This is session number 16, and we're honored to have two very fine music educators with us this evening. My name is David Starnes, and I serve as an education consultant to Music for All, and I'm also the director of orchestras at Cobb County Schools at Kennesaw Mountain High School. So I'm welcoming everyone that's with us tonight. We're glad you joined us for a very, very unique and interesting perspective to a topic that I'm sure is so near and dear to many of us. But before we get moving forward, I would love to have our panelists introduce themselves. Very, very fortunate to have both of these music educators with us tonight. And so I'm going to start with Ms. Candi Horton. Candi, thank you for joining us tonight.
It's an absolute pleasure, David. Thank you for having me. My name is Candi Horton, and I have been teaching at Thomas Middle School in Arlington Heights for about 20 years now. I got my bachelor's in music education at Bob Jones University in Greenville, South Carolina, followed with a master's at Northwestern University here in Evanston. I teach two beginning bands at the elementary schools at two elementary schools that feed into Thomas, and I teach the top band of three at the middle school. It's a real privilege to get those high-achieving students there. I also should mention I have two colleagues at Thomas as well. They each have a beginning band and one of the other middle school bands as part of our program. I'm also a professional trumpet player, and I think that's worth mentioning here because it is a big part of my sort of musical soul inside. I play professionally in the Chicagoland area, and that helps keep my ears sharp. As you can imagine, young band sounds all day long. It's really wonderful to sort of clean the ears out with my trumpet, making music with some wonderful players here in Chicago. And I draw often from those experiences in my teaching. So I highly recommend keeping your instruments alive, band directors out there.
Great advice. Thank you, Candi. And you said Bob Jones University. I was like, well, there can't be another one. There's one in South Carolina, but that's the one.
That's the one, yes.
I know right where it is. Well, welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'd also like to have Scott Casagrande, a dear friend of mine. We work together on several Music for All projects. And Scott, thank you for being with us tonight. And if you want to introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Thanks for having me, David. This is my 33rd year of teaching and 22 at John Hersey High School. I taught at Plainfield High School, which is on the south side of Chicago, and I also taught at Stephen Decatur High School in Central Illinois, really covering all kinds of levels and socioeconomic areas. Hersey is probably a school that is middle to upper class. Our band program is pretty strong in concert and jazz and marching areas, all three areas. I think, I got Candi mentioned her degrees. I got both of my degrees from University of Illinois, where I survived Jim Keane, and continue to learn from him. But yeah, that's kind of my background.
Scott, there's a rather large milestone coming up. You want to share that with everybody? Is that letting a cat out of the bag?
No, I'm retiring in June, and very excited for the next part of my life. It's got an interesting twist on tonight's format. We have a successor that has been named, and we're talking extensively about how we're going to recover from COVID, and I will be firmly entrenched and supportive of him as we make the transition into the next school year. So yeah, big milestone for me. Absolutely. Very exciting, scary at the same time.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll be right behind you, brother. Right behind you.
Right.
Well, before we launch off into our topic tonight, I want to give you a little background about how this topic came to be. My colleague Susan Smith and I put together a two-part, and if you were with us last week or 2 weeks ago for part one of this series, that was more three separate educators talking about how they were going to look back and what they had done previously and how they were going to move forward. And so part two of this, when Susan and I were discussing this format, we brought up the idea of what it would be to talk about within a cluster, within a program, because we all know that I was a middle school director for 13 years before I moved to the high school level. And I know without a successful middle school program, the high school program can't work. And without a successful high school program, the middle school kids usually don't have anywhere that they're looking forward to going. So it works hand in hand. And I thought it would be a really interesting perspective to see how two veteran educators, one of 20 years with Candi and one of 75 years in Scott, sorry, that was 35 years, of what that might look like. And here at the very end of Scott's career, having to deal with something like this. I'll share that I was a middle school and a high school public school teacher for 22 years, and I left the public school ranks to go to the university level, and I taught as an assistant professor at Western Carolina University, where I was involved with the music education program as well as the athletic band director. And I've decided to come back to the public school on a pandemic year. A lot of decisions behind that, a lot of reasons behind that, but the big reason is I just love high school kids and I love middle school kids, and I know I've made the right decision every single day when I walk into that room. I cannot wait to be with them. But that's weighing on students too. And so before we talk about what the recruitment part of this looks like, or what the retention part of this looks like, which is a subtopic of tonight, looking back and looking forward, I thought it might be good for our panelists to maybe talk a little bit about where they teach, what are some of the things that they've dealt with this year, and maybe put in perspective a little bit more tonight's conversation. So maybe the first thing is, Scott, since you've been at Hersey forever, how long have you worked with Candi in that particular relationship of your two schools?
Well, we've been fortunate to experience some good success at Hersey, and one of the large reasons for that is that we have great teachers training kids before they get to us, and we can take them to the next level. And I've been working with Candi for not directly 20 years ago. She started as kind of an assistant. I don't know how there's probably a correct title in there, but there was another middle school director that I started with when I began at Hersey, and then Candi took over his position, and we've been working pretty closely now for a long time.
About 8 years now or so.
8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And of course, the training and the interaction that we have, it's been a pleasure to work with somebody like Candi, who's extremely professional, really bright, and amazing musician, and connects well with kids. And I've been really fortunate to have her sending me the fruits of her labor, and our program at Hersey has flourished because of that. And we have two other feeders that send us students as well.
Okay.
The majority of them come from Candi School at Thomas.
Got it. So Candi, what grade do you start your students in band? What year do they start?
We start in 5th grade. So
Okay.
That's a day going to the elementary school for the band director. But we start them in 5th grade. And once they get to middle school, we have 3 bands there that are ability based. So by audition, we have a mixture of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in all 3 of the bands. So.
Okay, and I know it's different across the country, but where's the break point? Is it 5 through 7 or 5 through 8? Then they go to high school?
So elementary ends with 5th grade, and then the middle school is 6th through 8th.
Okay. So you see them in the 9th grade then, Scott. That's the first time you'll get them.
Correct.
Okay. So, Candi, maybe talk a little bit about your school's socioeconomic makeup. And I'm going to ask Scott the same question because having taught in a high school program, when I was the director of bands at Kennesaw Mountain, we had 3 middle schools that fed into us, but we also had magnet school kids that came to us, and they could come from all over the county. So what does your makeup look like at Thomas?
I believe it's pretty similar to what Scott has, although there are little pockets of differences in neighborhoods, but mostly middle class. There are, like I said, a few pockets of some lower income students, but mostly middle class, I would say. What would you say, Scott?
I think it's been interesting. I would call it middle to upper class, because I would say when I started 20 something years ago, it was definitely middle class, but I see a lot of those bungalows getting torn down, and the little McMansions going, but then there's pockets of lower income students everywhere. So it's all over the place, really. I think it's hard to characterize.
Yeah.
Right. As a lot of public schools are right now. And I'm going to hang on to that as far as the upper class part of it, because there's a question that's going to come up later on with regard to that. What size middle school do you have, Candi? How many students are in your middle school? And then how many of those kids are in the band program?
We have just a little over 1,000 and of student population at the middle school.
I wish that was the band program.
Yeah, I would need more than me and my colleagues. So we have, for the band program with just middle school, it's on a normal year, it's right around 175 or so, give or take.
Okay.
And usually our elementary schools are just under 200 or so each year. Obviously, there's a drop off there when they get to middle.
Sure. Right.
But those are normal year numbers.
Right. And Scott, same question for you. What's the size of Hersey and then the band program?
1,800 to 1,900 and the school. And then I would say the band program has fluctuated between 120 to 170. So, based on the demands that we have for the high school program and what we ask of them, I'm happy with that percentage.
Yeah, that's really great.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw the marching band this fall, Scott, in one of the Music for All virtual performance weekends. But can you talk a little bit about the teaching modalities that you experienced from the very beginning of this year? I assume both of you probably went home in March last year and didn't come back. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So when you came back, when did you start, Scott? What month did you guys come back, and what teaching environment were you in?
We were able to start with sectionals, marching band sectionals in June. They brought athletics back for what they call training, and they weren't going to allow us to train. And we made some very good points to the administration and why are athletes allowed to train, and what's the difference? The athletes are huffing and puffing out there. Why can't we blow through our horns, especially with University of Colorado PPE recommendations, and even back then it was starting. So we started with those small groups, and that's been kind of the trend through the course of the year. It's been the small groups have been forced because of COVID, but because of the time off, the small groups have also been advantageous from an educational perspective to give kids individual help to get them back on track. And so that's how we started. And then as COVID got better, we added more and more people. And then we got into the marching season. We had a specific drill that was written where everybody was 6 feet apart, and we had 3 groups of 50. In Illinois, we were not allowed to be in groups larger than 50. So we wrote the drill so that we had 3 groups, and they never got within 10 yards of each other, and they stayed within their groups. And for me, the whole point of this year has been, how are we going to come out of this, and what's it going to look like next fall? And what we don't do this year, it's going to make it that much harder next year. And so we worked hard to train kids with marching stuff, keep them playing. And then when we went inside, same thing. We were able to keep kids together for November. We shut down in over Thanksgiving. They put us back into fully virtual, and we came back in late January with, again, small groups. But the ability, just focusing on fundamentals and keeping kids playing and performing. A lot of my colleagues have done more, intellectual exercises with the kids, whereas my perspective and focus has been, I just want them to keep playing. So, we have them performing with recordings, listening to full band, doing it. And in fact, in some ways, it's been better. I mean, I know that Candi will say the same thing. We've been forced to do things a certain way through the school year. And there are things that I never would have done with technology that I will maintain. I mean, the jazz band is sounding as good as it has ever sounded because we're doing so much listening now. It's like and I've found that, the learning curve has been shortened. We're still doing a great amount of sight reading, but not just the jazz band, but all the groups listening to professional musicians more than we ever have before has really helped us maintain those fundamentals that I'm looking ahead to. Now, I know that Candi hasn't been as fortunate as she has not been able to keep kids in person. So, during the school day, we've been hybrid. Mostly we started virtual and then we moved to hybrid. Say about a third of the band was in the classroom, not enough for me to do anything ensemble wise. And so pretty much online and in person, I've just been watching them practice, giving them constant assignments, keeping them playing. But then in the evening, we've been able to come together and practice during marching season, 2 nights a week with the full group. And then when we came back, when we were inside November, 1 night a week with all the groups. So all the jazz bands, percussion ensembles, concert band, symphonic band. That's pretty much what we've been doing over the course of the school year.
Well, I'm sure this sounds familiar.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'm sure it sounds familiar to so many people that are going to hear this webinar, whether you get them at all. So I know that a lot of schools have been completely virtual. Your dad's old state of Virginia, I think they just came back for the first time and saw kids for the first time in a year. Yep. The same way in Kentucky. In Georgia, we've been all virtual until mid-November, and then we were hybrid. But I want to come back to the socioeconomic thing, because what I found was in my students, the more upper class students that I had, the more they had more technology at home, and those were the students that stayed home. Or if they were juniors or seniors and they were college bound, or they were taking joint enrollment at local universities, that was a deal breaker. And so we're still about probably 1/3 face-to-face, 2/3 at home. But I agree with you, Scott, that you've had an opportunity to do things in ways that you've never been able to do before. We did a lot of theory, we did a lot of history, we did a lot of ear training, we did composition. And it was phenomenal, the things that we were able to do that we couldn't in most situations. And we're actually having a festival this week, and I've done a face-to-face with the full group 1 time, and we're going to go in Friday and see what happens.
Wow.
So talk about rolling the dice.
You are rolling the dice. That's crazy. Good for you, though.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, we just made a concerted effort as a department that all 3 choirs and all 3 orchestras and all 3 concert bands needed to have this. So we didn't get a year behind in this sequence, because the bands didn't get it last spring. Luckily, the choirs did and the orchestras did, but the bands got no large group performance evaluation last year. So we just didn't want to see that happen 2 years in a row. So Candi, maybe talk a little bit about, because I know the middle school thing gets a little bit different, especially if you're starting kids in the 5th grade or getting kids for the first time in the 6th grade. How has that worked out?
Oh, yeah. That whole starting the kids thing, it has been interesting. Like you said, we went home in the spring, fully virtual, and we started in the fall fully virtual. And while the student body was given hybrid opportunities as the fall progressed, the band was still relegated to being fully virtual until the last week of January. And since then, the students are given a choice whether they want to be in person or not. And what that boils down for me is about 2/3 of my students are in person and 1/3 have chosen to stay virtual. When it comes to beginners, recruiting was basically non-existent as far as our normal activities. At the time, we usually do our beginner band recruitment in the spring so we can hit the ground running come fall. That was completely shelved. So in the fall, we did a sort of recruiting thing where we had a Zoom meeting with all of our fifth grade families and invited them to join the band. And I talked a little bit about the band program, what it's about, join it, blah, blah, blah. And we had them sign up. And normally we would go through instrument fittings and testings and all of that. And of course, with COVID, so many hurdles to jump through and administration permissions and things, just too much red tape to go through. So we experimented and said, sign up. What instrument do you want? And just let the kids choose. And come what may, see what happens. Amazingly, the instruments that students chose, by and large, have worked out. But they have learned completely through a computer. So when we did have students come back to have some of those first in-person experiences in January, it was sort of like, what's going to happen? Will we hear real flutes or not?
That's scary. That's scary.
Yeah. But you know what? It worked out, and some of the things with starting the beginners on a Zoom format were really beneficial. For example, flute embouchure, that when the students are staring at the screen and looking at the embouchure that I'm demonstrating, and they're trying it, and their picture is right next to the example picture, they were able to find it amazingly fast. So there were some positives, and we just sort of celebrated those and kept trudging forward.
Go for it. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, that's a great segue that you already went to that as far as the recruiting part of it, because my next question is really twofold. And you kind of address how you got them from the fourth grade to the fifth grade, or fifth grade to the sixth grade once they came to the middle school. But Scott, how did you deal with getting kids? And I think maybe this is a two-step question, like getting kids from the middle school to the high school, and then maybe even talk a little bit about how you assigned your leadership and all the auditions that you typically do in the spring. How did all that happen?
Well, we typically don't do auditions in the spring.
Okay.
We're able to do our auditions after marching season. So that worked out great. If you're asking specifically about last spring into summer, as it came from 8th grade into high school, we pretty much did what we always do, and that is we have heavy involvement with the high school leaders in the band. And so when we came in June, they had taken a step back, as everybody had, and not just the middle school kids, but everybody. And so, the small group things where we increased the size of our staff, which we were fortunately able to do, even though we had heavy losses in fundraisers that usually fund the band program in the spring, but we had enough in reserve, fortunately, that we were able to increase the size of our staff. And I see that as an issue moving forward into next year. I mean, I don't know necessarily that it needs to be more time. It just needs to be focused time and smaller groups, and really careful about the kind of people that we're bringing in to interact with those new middle school kids, which is what we did a year ago as well. So I felt really good as we came out of the summer that we had taught the kids the fundamentals and made up for lost time as much as we could. And I mean, you mentioned you have one rehearsal. We have 7. We've had one night a week. We have 7 rehearsals. We'll have 9 or 10, I think, before we do our performance, our culminating performance of the year this year at our Chicagoland Band Festival at Hersey. And they're going to do the whole Persichetti Symphony, all 4 movements. And we've already done the first movement, second movement, third movement. We did a live stream about 2 weeks ago of just the first movement, and they're moving and they're doing everything and I'm really proud of that, because in the midst of all this that we're going through, just the team of people that I've been surrounded with that rolled up their sleeves and say, how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to do what we've always done, only in a different way? We're going to achieve the same things that we've always achieved, but there's a different path now. And so,
and I think it's one of those things too, that we try to instill this in band and orchestra kids, that leadership, that perseverance, that resilience piece is a part of the DNA that we teach them every single day. And boy, this thing has put it to the test.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm amazed at the kids that are at home, when they've got those cameras on and they don't have their microphones on, you just hope that it's all the right stuff. And when I would bring kids in for those full group rehearsals, they were doing as well as the kids in the room had been. And I was just completely blown away.
When you have that first rehearsal, right, after they've been online and hybrid, the kids that have been doing the work, and they're like, wow, this is great. And the kids that weren't doing the work, they're having an oh crap moment.
Oh yeah, it's a deer in headlights moment. Yeah, and you can tell the ones that have, What I found out was the next day, complete engagement as far as their virtual learning. So they're not dismissing it, but I just think they don't take it as maybe as serious as they probably should sometimes. So Candi, I'm going to go to you on this next question, but what strategies did you create to try to compensate for the loss of numbers between what you said your typical year was and what this year was? Has it hurt your instrumentation? Are you just having to look where down the road? Because I remember when I was a middle school director, I'd say, I want this many clarinets in 6th grade and this many horns in 6th grade, because I knew between attrition and everything else, by the 8th grade, it would probably be more optimal. So you started an army in 6th grade, half an army came back in 7th grade, and in 8th grade, you hope to have enough kids to send to high school. So how has that affected your strategies for this year?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Well, with our beginners, every year we know who knows how many are going to be there by the end. But with middle school, for sure, it is something to be thinking about, especially with my view at the top group. I'm hoping for a balanced band. We actually have been very fortunate, and there aren't too many outliers of craziness. It's been pretty. When we've lost kids, it's been sort of an average across the board, instrumentation wise. But as far as what have we done to try to keep them signing up and keep on going, I think. Well, okay. Another way that we've been fortunate in our middle school, we have lost a lot, but it hasn't been the huge numbers that we were expecting. As we ended the spring, I thought, oh my goodness, we are going to have nobody signing up. Well, if we have 30 people, we're going to be lucky. But that wasn't the case, which is great. But there were many, many kids that sadly we did lose. There were many kids that didn't sign up that we went to battle for. And at the beginning of the year, when we didn't see their names on our lists, I know I took my list of kids from the previous year and made phone calls and reached out with email. And just tried to talk with the parents and the students both about, hey, this is what you're giving up if you don't continue, and remember the fun we had when we were in person. This pandemic is not going to last forever. Do you really want to X out band in your life? And trying to keep that hope alive for them, and to try to remind them of this wonderful thing that they used to have in their life. Don't you want to continue it? And that actually did work for a lot of them, thankfully. So I think that personal contact and keeping that hope alive, it's needful even now.
And I've heard band and orchestra kids and choir kids say as well, this is their family. This is who they know at school, and to quit band is almost like walking away from their friends. So I think, this is one of those things where we can say that definitely the friendship and the camaraderie and teamwork that we create in instrumental music definitely can survive a pandemic. We know that now. So,
yeah.
So I want to kind of talk about the here and now. What trends have you witnessed? And either one of you can jump into this since the beginning of the school year with regard to interest levels. Have you seen kids' interest kind of go away, the kids that are at home, or the kids that are in the room that were with you last year maybe, and they know it's not the same as it was? And how have you kept their spirits alive? Either one of you can jump in on that one.
I'm going to let Candi take that, because I think she had greater challenges because she was very virtual versus my situation, which was a combination of virtual and in person. We were able to keep kids because we saw them. So.
Yeah, I didn't lock eyes with my students, any of them, until that last week of January. So, what I was seeing through my screen were kids that were languishing and just disengaged and struggling to turn in assignments and have their cameras on. Even in small group sectionals, I had to really coax that to happen, and sometimes wasn't successful. Virtual band is for the birds. it just really is. And just that was just heartbreaking to me to see. Trying to just keep their interest alive, sharing videos for us to watch together and discuss, and all those kinds of things that we do to give them some enrichment. But things did seem to change for everybody when we started to trickle back into those in-person experiences. The students that are still remote, there's a light in their eyes again. And when they can hear what's going on in the live experience that they're zooming in on, I think that is making a big difference for them and helping them realize, okay, yeah, I'm not going to be home all the time. I don't know. Does that?
No, it totally does. And it leads me to the next question, which you kind of brought that into the conversation. But are you guys planning to readjust where kids can enter the program? Let's say that a fifth grader didn't start and they show up at the middle school. Are you going to allow them to start in middle school next year? Is that something that's possible?
Absolutely. That's something I'm sorry. For at the middle school, we're going to have and offer a first ever beginning band to the sixth graders next year. So those students that are right now in fifth grade, not in band, not getting that opportunity, will have a chance to join us as a beginner at the middle school. It's unprecedented, but hey, isn't that the word of the year?
Right?
What's that?
I said, so is everything else in our world right now.
Yeah.
So Scott, what if a student left Candi's program in eighth grade? They didn't join the ninth grade program because they were virtual. Would you let them come back as a 10th grader? Would that be something that would be a possibility?
Sure, absolutely. But the interesting thing, Candi told you what she went through over the course of the year. I would say 90% of her kids are signed up for the Hersey band next year.
That's awesome.
Yep. So, obviously she made it happen. And the other two middle schools was really struggling. And what Candi was talking about in terms of recruitment. The recruitment has got to be on steroids this year. And I loved hearing her talk about basically what I heard was one kid at a time. I one of my colleagues in the school district that got his numbers for next year had 9 freshmen signed up for band, and he's used to 3 times that. And he rolled up his sleeves, and one kid at a time with a team of high school kids, and they got their numbers up to 25, and they're still growing. And our numbers, not from Thomas, but from the other 2 middle schools, are down a great number. And I anticipate that there will be a great amount of recruiting, one kid at a time. And, I know a lot of programs, particularly in low income areas, do kind of a big brother, big sister program where they will assign one kid. And I haven't never felt like I needed to do that, but in a year like this, all hands on deck,
Yeah.
and
I'm glad you said that, because we're doing the same thing. And in our program, we have 2 feeder middle schools, but we get students for our magnet program from every middle school in the entire district of 180,000 kids. So what we're doing is assigning students as we get every single kid. One of the students in the orchestra program is getting that student to handhold them now all the way to the day they walk into school for the first time in August for next fall. And our kids were really stoked about that. We don't have every single student on leadership, but this is a former leadership, and it gives them that opportunity to apprentice, if you will, on that. And I think maybe for you, Scott, also, as far as just a student starting in the middle, if they come back and they're part of a program, a 10th grader in the program, talk about the engagement of the parents. Have you had any contact with parents to say, and I'm saying this for the people that are on the webinar tonight, because this might be a strategy to, even if you've missed the kid, maybe you get the list of kids who were in that 8th grade program and go directly to their parents and say, hey, it's not too late if you want to still join the high school program, and reach out that way. Have you had any involvement with parents?
Well, I think it's always a combination of appealing to the kids, appealing to the parents. A trend that I've noticed over the course of my career, and David, I'm sure you would agree with this, is that parents are, at least in my community, parents are less and less involved with that decision to stay in band than they were a long time ago. And so, but when the parents are on board, usually the kids will follow. So yeah, I think it's a combination of appealing to the kid, and my success in recruitment has come from getting the high school kids to connect with the younger kids, because they are more in awe of high school kids than they would be from the old man. But the parents on the other side are more they're listening more actively to what I have to say than the kids would be, and I think that double that double perspective, both kids to kids, adults to adults, and appealing to different sensibilities within those 2 groups has shown success. And I anticipate that perspective, that strategy is going to be like I said earlier, on steroids in the next 2 months, really.
Something that I think was helpful that Scott, you did this year with our 8th graders. You had a Zoom meeting with all the families of our 8th graders. Were invited to join and watch. And Scott presented the band program to them and all the opportunities that they're going to get in high school and whatnot. But he had student leaders there, like half a dozen or a dozen or so?
Yeah.
And you put them in breakout rooms with the student leaders. So they were no adults talking about the program. And I know a lot of my students mentioned to me how good that was to just talk with a high school student without any hawks lurking overhead. And I think that made a big difference to our kids to get questions answered and hear it from the high school students what band is all about.
Yeah, and that's another case of doing what we've always done, but
a
just
different way.
taking a different path. I mean, when we were
Right.
in person, we would always do that. We'd send the high school kids off with the eighth graders into sectionals and let them talk. And the sectionals really weren't about preparing for the concert that we used to share in December. It was really about getting to know one another and getting comfortable and establishing relationships. And so that breakout room, that's as close as we can get to that. And not just in that instance, but of course in our ensembles. Thank God Zoom has a breakout room,
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was getting ready to say. Our school district has not allowed breakout rooms, believe it or
Really?
not, because it's a way of not having an adult in every one of those rooms to be able to supervise what's happening. So that really killed some things we wanted to do. But one of the things that I've heard a lot of people are doing is setting up after school and evening Zoom sessions with upcoming members, with the director sitting in the room with his leadership or her leadership students, welcoming the new students and having those new member meetings via Zoom at night. Can you guys go to each other's programs as far as take kids to the high school and high school to the middle school right now, or is that off limits?
Well, it's going to be interesting. We have our Chicagoland Band Festival coming up in a few weeks, and there's going to be an in-person performance by the Thomas Middle School Band.
Oh, wow.
So she had to get special permission to be able to do that, which
From our
we're excited
superintendent.
about, but
Wow.
there'll be a
Wow.
few of us hawks around that group when they walk in the building.
Yeah, I bet there will be.
Yeah.
Well, so we've looked back, and so we can take the second half of tonight's webinar and look forward a little bit. What strategies have you guys found with regard to student motivation and retention of the current students that you have? So the students that are sitting there every day and they're playing one on a part, or they're playing two on a part, and all their friends are at home, have you seen any discouragement or heard, I don't know if I'm going to do this again, or you could see those students that are marginal at this point? Have you witnessed any of that?
I would say that it's all over the place. I mean, fortunately, I haven't seen too many kids discouraged. We had literally like one or two drops at early in the year where like, we can't be live. One kid said to me, Mr. Casagrande, we played at the Kennedy Center last year, and now we're not even going to be able to play in our gym. I mean, why do I want to do this? I'm like, well, you know what? It's a good point, but we need to keep as much of a semblance of reality and normalcy here as we can. And he was discouraged, but I think that's a microcosm of only a small group of people in the program. And I think just play, we have been able to play in person, so everything we do in our hybrid classes during the week is geared toward that one night together. And I would say some of the things that really helped, Candi and I were talking last week, and the use of software has been off the charts. We're using a program called Music First now, which is really great. Of course, we're using Music Professor, and having and that's been great. I had the kids go through the videos with those instructors, and it helped to use a phrase here, fill the gap of anything that they may have lost along the way in their training, like a fingering, or maybe a different perspective on how to play vibrato, or, those Music Professor videos have been really, really helpful. We've used a lot of smart music. That has been really helpful. Like we'll have an evening rehearsal. They'll have their music checked off, 2 weeks ago. And I'll say, okay, today in class, you're going to complete the first movement. I want you to play through it. It's got to be at 95%. So I know that music when you walk into the gym tonight for our in-person rehearsal. And so Sight Reading Factory has been huge, and actually is going to be even huger now in the next couple of months, because I'm worried about they have one piece of music and they're not playing additional pieces of music. So I'm going to supplement in class what they do there. So keeping them motivated and retained, I think, is just excited about new things and continuing to play their instrument. And then, those evening rehearsals are like really fun and intense, and so that's how we're keeping them going. But Candi, you've got a different situation.
Yeah. As far as, seeing how they are right now, I think that hope is coming back to them. But I think throughout the year, I haven't had very many students drop out as well, which has been wonderful. I had 2 wind ensemble students right at the beginning of the year, similar to like what Scott was saying, frustrated that why bother. So that was unfortunate. And I've had 2 beginners stop since the school year began, which I'm relieved about, surprised, happy, ecstatic. But I think the reasons for that is band gives them a break, and it gives them something to look forward to that's different from what they're getting in their other classes. Even though it is through a computer, we are feeding a different part of these humans, and they are enjoying getting that rush that we all know that we get when we play our instruments and make music together, even if it's odd in an odd world. But I think just keeping goals in front of my students have helped as well. So we've had milestones that we're going toward. Like we just finished a virtual solo fest where they uploaded their solos to Flipgrid, and we're having outside judges come in and give them some feedback. And it's more laid back than what we would normally do, but it's something. And that's helped give them something to strive for. And now we're looking forward to the performance coming up for CICVF at Hersey. That's huge, and we'll see what happens. But that's been unbelievable in the motivation levels that I've seen in my kids now that they had we do have a performance for sure. Really? Okay, I'm going to practice.
Right.
And they're turning in their assignments more regularly, and I think just keeping those goals ahead of them, keeping a carrot. Any kind of carrot we can find is an important part.
David, I want to add something to this, and everybody's got different situations, but we always talk about you're not just teaching students, you're teaching parents, you're teaching adults, and I've never felt that our program was more important than this year, because staring in front of a screen and not just saying that to my colleagues, but saying that to parents, and I had so many parents that said to me at the end of the year, a lot of their other teachers are checking out, but I hear them playing that instrument, and everybody's at home, they're hearing them. And I think a lot of, if it's ever been more true, it's in the last year. And that is making a solid case to administration. Don't just accept what they dictate to you. Get in early before the decisions are made. And Scott Lang made a comment to that. When we were all in March and April, like, what do we do now? I went to the internet and listened to and read what other people were doing and thinking. And Scott made a comment at a thing I was at that I attended, and he said, "Get to your administrators early." I'm like, I would do that, but I really need to do that now. And then make cases. I mean, the University of Colorado stuff was in front of my administrators the second it came to my desk, to my computer. And then I see that happening as we're starting to open up over the next couple of months. I think that's going to be really, really important to be communicating with administrators who are as overwhelmed as we are, and trying to make a very short, concise point to the administration. Please allow us to do this for this. Here's the research. This is what kids need. We have to get them back to normal as fast as we can within the constraints that are presented to us. And administrators are as overwhelmed, if not more overwhelmed, as we are. I mean, I remember watching my principal over the summer, and we sat down, and he and I are pretty good friends, and he just looked like he had been through a world war. I mean, I can't imagine the kind of decisions, and you're not going to make any decisions that make everyone happy. And so, making those points, I mean, in a regular year, that's an important strategy, get to advocate for yourself, but even more now, because I think administrators, their sense of, just like us, our sense of what's rational and irrational. I think in COVID, everybody has a screw loose. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I mean, some of us more than others, me for sure, but, trying to get to that rationale and put the data in front of them and say, here's what works, here's what you should be able to do, and make a professionally stated, data-driven, presentation to the people that are making the decisions.
I think it's a great point. And one of the things that I'm going to do near the end of this thing is, as we have some enrichment things that kids get 10% for, that has nothing to do with playing their instrument or attending class. It's going to a virtual concert or attending a concert if they could do that. But one of the things I'm going to do is have a student write a 1-page essay on a testimonial of how music got them through this, and start collecting those and getting those to administration and to my county supervisor, because I think it's important. We can talk about it all day long, and that kid that comes to you after class that says, my day has been horrible until 3rd block, and we made music today, and I'm going to go to 4th block with a smile on my face. And you told us you want us to sing a melody as we're walking out of orchestra class this year. I'm totally going to be doing that today. So
awesome.
So I think those are the kinds of things the students are going to tell the best story, and I think if those stories get back to our administrators, that really helps our case as well. So
when you hear a kid singing or whistling as they walk out your door at the end of class, at the end of rehearsal, and they're singing and whistling the music that you just got done performing, you've got them.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. And if it's Persichetti, they got a great ear. If they can sing it one night.
Well, they are.
Fantastic.
They love it.
They do.
They are loving playing it.
It's a hard sell the very first time, and then after that, they love it. You're right. Yeah. It's always that way.
I teach some of the trumpet players at the high school privately in a private studio, and I hear them, we work on things, and they tell me what they're thinking, and they really do. They love that Persichetti, and I'm thinking, great, man.
Yeah.
They are sounding great. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Drink the Kool-Aid, right, Scott? That's the way it works. Yeah, that's it. Well, so wrapping up here, we've got a few minutes on this last topic, and I want to bring this up because I think one of the things I've heard, this is year 32 for me as a teacher, and one of the things that I hear more often than not are young teachers saying, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm equipped to do this. This pandemic has completely wrecked my sense of confidence, or what I think I have in my bag of tricks. I'm teaching 5 kids face to face, and there's 30 at home. I don't want to do this anymore. So I'm gonna have Candi say some things and Scott say some things. But Candi, what advice would you offer a young teacher, let's say either year 1 to 5, and they're questioning the validity of their effectiveness, and we can tell kids all day long, it's a pandemic, this will move on. But adults seem to take that a little harder. So what advice would you give that person?
Stay inspired and keep going. I can tell you from personal experience, this is hard for veterans. I have had many countless very low moments and times where, especially like last spring, thinking like, what am I doing? And having that soul searching moment of, do I want to do this? Is this really what I'm cut out to be? I mean, I was going through those questions myself, and this is my life. And if I'm sure Scott can attest, he knows me. This is a big deal for someone like me to be asking these questions. So you're not alone. Young teacher who's struggling with these, you're not alone. We're dealing with that too. But this is such a wonderful thing that you're doing, a career that you're in, the impact that we can have on these students. So my advice is to stay inspired and make sure that you're taking care of yourself, your own emotional state and your own musical state as well. Listen to the music, keep your ears filled with songs that you love that have inspired you over the years. that were inspirational to you in the past and will be inspirational to you now. Listen to podcasts, listen to whatever you can get your hands on, read the books. Also, just from a just personal emotional standpoint, not only musical, but personal, do what you need to do to stay focused and centered inside, whatever it is for you. For me, it's prayer and making sure I have time for my own devotional thoughts and time with my Bible. That's important to me. But whatever you do to feed your soul inside, that's so important, because you're constantly giving to these students and you need to keep your cup full. So stay inspired, because it's worth it.
Great advice, Candi. Great advice. Scott?
I think, so related to what Candi just said, to me, it's about balance. Working hard, rolling up your sleeves, problem solving, do what you got to do, but then get away from it and find other things. I think one of the silver linings of COVID is connecting to family and connecting to friends and connecting to, getting away, having the time to really find something that inspires you. I would say, and I've told many people this, I think I've reinvented myself 7-8 times over the course of my career. Just looking for the next thing that's going to inspire me. And my time when I started with Music for All in 2012 was a big inspiration for me to keep teaching and doing things. And this really, I'm inspired by the year that we've had to move forward and to find ways to what we've learned over this last year. There are ways to make our world better. And that to me is really inspiring. I think, the use of software, the way that we do performances now, there's a million things that are there that are inspiring. And, when I just said a minute ago, when you hear that kid walking out and they're whistling that tune, that you just got done playing, that to me is a big victory. And that's part of what this is. Look for the victories, and revel in the victories and celebrate the victories, as small as they are, whatever they are, just celebrate them personally and with others. And so, that balance of working hard, focused, and trying to solve the problems that are in front of you to the best of your ability. I've said this over the course of the last year. At the end of this, I'm going to look back and say, it sucked, but I did everything that I could to make the best of it. And if you really truly believe in your soul that you did those things that you could do, given the situation that you have, then you need to hold your head up and feel like mission accomplished. You did the best you could. Now, how do we get out of this? How do we get back to normal as fast as we can? And the next set of problem-solving things. We've reinvented the wheel over and over and over all year. And honestly, I'm not just saying. I'm really inspired. People have said to me, "I'm retiring," and Scott, I'm sorry you have to go out in a year like this. I'm like, no, this has been awesome. It hasn't been, but it has. Never before have I felt like my class was really as important as it was. It got kids through this pandemic. And I really, truly believe that.
I completely agree with you. And, when everybody was saying, I can't believe you would come back to public school and teach your last, 2 or 3 years before retirement, I almost feel like it's a service to the profession right now. I almost feel like now more than ever to come back and to be able to do this and to mentor younger teachers, but to get back in there and inspire students. It's easy to complain, young teachers, about the obvious. Those that don't complain about the obvious are always looking for something, and those are the ones you look to be the next leaders and the next stakeholders in music education. We all probably know the name Brian Balmages, and I had Brian speak to my university music ed students last spring when all this stuff happened. Within weeks of us closing the university, he was on a webinar with my music ed students, and he made this comment, and I've said this to students many, many times. He said there will be 2 kinds of people that emerge from this pandemic. The one that somehow got worse because they did nothing other than self-indulge in their own misery. And the ones that reinvented themselves, like Scott just said, and found a new version, a better version of themselves, and figured out what they needed to do when we do return to normal, that the students wouldn't even recognize who they are because they knew themselves better than they did going into this. So I would highly recommend thinking about that if you're a young teacher. And I can tell you that I've done it too. I've started putting time away for walks, and I'll do exactly what Candi will do. And I'll go out and I'll walk 6 to 7 miles on an afternoon, and I'll put on a podcast and I'll listen to music, or I'll listen to somebody talk about music, or something that has nothing to do with music, just not politics and not the world's craziness right now.
Yes.
But something that is mind refreshing and a reset every single day. You have to do that more than ever. And I'm thinking that the big guy upstairs is teaching us a lesson that we all need to hit reset. And I believe that is very important to see how much we had on our plates prior to this, and would we ever go back and do that way again? That there is life past the classroom, and that'll allow you to be a better teacher every single day in the classroom if you have energy for yourself. So
yeah, and David, I'll just really quick, I want to state, and I say this to young teachers all the time, you're not alone, and you don't be afraid to ask other people what's going on with them, and ask advice, ask questions, ask. It's so
Absolutely.
important.
We all had mentors. And, Scott and I, it's interesting. I don't know about Candi's background, but Scott's dad was a band director. My dad was a band director. And, we were fortunate to be able to have those people in our lives to just lean on and pick up the phone and say, what would you do if, and so it's a special thing, but all of us should have mentors, whoever those people are. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to close tonight by, first of all, saying thank you to Candi and Scott. This has been fantastic. When I asked Candi and Scott to do this, I was unaware that Scott was retiring this year. And I think this actually makes us even more powerful in my eyes, because you're seeing somebody that has gone the full 360 in a career, a phenomenal career, and going out at the very top of his game in a very unpredictable, unconventional way. But I want to say thank you to both of you guys for joining us tonight. Music for All's mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through Music for All. Our vision is to be a catalyst to ensure that every child across America has access and opportunity to participate in active music making in his or her scholastic environment, pandemic or not. We'd like to thank our national presenting sponsor, the Yamaha Corporation of America. So be sure to check out the Yamaha Educator Suite at yamahaeducatorsuite.com. Before we say goodnight, I think it's important for everyone to understand that Music for All's programming, annual programming, has been greatly affected by the pandemic. And we're still offering things like you're experiencing tonight, other educational outreach programs. You've recently heard that we're not going to be doing a summer symposium, but that doesn't mean we're not going to be educating over the summer, that there will be virtual learning over the summer that we hope you'll take advantage of as well. But during these uncertain times, we would be extremely grateful for any donations that you could help Music for All to continue this programming as we get over this hump and continue to offer educational experiences and advocacy opportunities for not only teachers, but students as well. So please consider gifting Music for All at any amount that your budget will allow. Your gift allows us to serve our mission with future educational programming such as this webinar. So please visit musicforall.org/give. And finally, please join us at our next episode of Mind the Gap in 3 weeks, Tuesday, April 6th at 7:30 Eastern Time. Put it on your calendar for the second part of our programming on teacher health and well-being. Tonight's conversation at the end was a great segue to that. My colleague Susan Smith will be joined by the great Michael Coomer, if you know who Michael is, and Colonel Thomas Palmatier and Mackie Spradley, all phenomenal people that can offer insight inspiration, and encouragement to everything that you're dealing with right now as a teacher through health and well-being. Until then, for Music for All, I'm David Starnes. Thank you for joining us tonight. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
Thank you.